My sister laughed when she took my office chair. Minutes later, her voice trembled on voicemail. I said calmly, "Did you enjoy Section 7? My father delivered his verdict, and the conference room became silent. The company's board members sat around the mahogany table. My sister Lauren looked smug next to my father, and I stood at the head of the room, presenting my quarterly report. Suspended, I repeated to ensure I had heard right. Until you apologize to your sister for undermining her authority, Dad continued, his voice carrying the tone he employed when he thought a decision had been made. 10 days without pay should allow you to ponder on proper working behavior. Lauren adjusted the fancy blazer she purchased with her expense account and attempted to appear wounded. The endeavor could have been successful if I hadn't spent 28 years learning to read her expressions. Triumph shone through the artificial pain in her eyes. The incident that ignited the circus occurred 5 days prior. Lauren, our head of customer relations, had promised a major account that we could provide a customized software solution in 4 weeks. The actual timeline was at least 12 weeks, as she would have known if she had bothered to confer with me or anyone in the development department I had been running for 6 years. I'd emailed the client with the realistic schedule, copying my father as CEO and Lauren as a courtesy. Professional, simple, and required to avoid a lawsuit when we failed to keep her absurd promise. Lauren stormed into my office, calling it sabotage. Now here we were, with Dad taking her side because he always did. All right, I said. Everyone appeared surprised by how simple my solution was. Dad was clearly prepared for an argument, having spent the morning mentally rehearsing his ideas about family loyalty and line of command. That's it. Lauren could not keep the astonishment out of her voice. You are not going to fight this? You want me suspended? I am suspended. You want an apology? You will get one. I gathered my presentation materials with steady hands. Is there anything else, or can I go clean up my desk for the next 10 days? Dad frowned, clearly perturbed by my cooperation. Well, expect you back on the 18th, ready to move forward professionally. I nodded and went out, ignoring Lauren's happy smile and the board members' uneasy shuffling. After witnessing this family drama develop during what should have been a typical business meeting. For the past 6 years, my office had served as my sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Portland, and the walls displayed my Harvard degrees as well as awards earned by the development department under my direction. One shelf was packed with photos of my staff celebrating new product releases, another had prototypes of every project I had overseen from conception to completion. I had created something here. During my tenure, the development department tripled in size, and revenue for our division surged by 300%. I'd hired great talent, implemented systems that other organizations have since replicated, and fostered a workplace culture in which employees desired to come to work. My father launched Sterling Tech Solutions 35 years ago, growing it from a 2-person operation to a corporation with 250 employees and clients across North America. He'd worked 16-hour days, sacrificed relationships, and thrown everything into making it a success. Then he delegated growing amounts of control to Lauren, who contributed average ideas and exceptional manipulating abilities. Family dynamics have always been difficult. Lauren was the firstborn, 2 years older than me, and she competed for Dad's attention throughout our upbringing. Every accomplishment I earned was disregarded or reduced. The honor roll became expected rather than commended. Lauren's engagement announcement overshadowed my admittance to Harvard the following week. Mom used to attempt to strike a balance and make sure I understood how important my accomplishments were. She died of a sudden stroke 6 years ago, 3 months after I joined the company. Dad's preference for Lauren grew stronger in the absence of her calming presence. I began moving my personal belongings into boxes, working meticulously through drawers and shelves. My degrees came off the wall first, securely wrapped in bubble wrap. The accolades followed, each signifying late nights, problem-solving sessions, and breakthroughs they weren't. Daniel, my second-in-command in development, sent me a text message. What just happened? Lauren's telling everyone, you're suspended. I replied back, taking some private time. You're in charge. That appeared unattainable until. Trust your intuition. More texts arrived from team members, but I silenced my phone and kept packing. Each item I wrapped felt like I was shedding weight that I hadn't realized was so heavy. The difficulty of continually justifying my decisions. The weariness of showing my expertise to individuals who are determined to question it. The disappointment of seeing my father choose Lauren's ego over the company's welfare. All of this had compounded into a burden that I'd accepted. Emily from my team had sent me 3 messages wondering whether everything was okay. Ryan, one of my greatest developers, was curious if this was truly happening. Even individuals from different departments were contacting out, perplexed by Lauren's happy assertion that I had been dealt with properly. Grapevine had always been efficient, but seeing it operate in real time revealed something I hadn't really appreciated before. Everyone knew. They'd witnessed Lauren's incompetence, her taking credit for tasks she hadn't completed, and her tendency of making promises that my staff had to hustle to keep. They had sensed Dad's preference, even if they had never expressed it clearly. My phone rang with a call from Aunt Carol, Mom's sister. She was the only family member, aside from Mom, who had never observed the dynamics fully. Carol attempted to maintain a relationship with both Lauren and me after Mom's death, but the balance became increasingly difficult. I responded to this one. "Hey Aunt Carol, your father just called me and asked if I could talk some sense into you," she continued without explanation. "He seems to think you're having some kind of breakdown. I told him that suspending you for doing your job was probably the stupidest decision he's made in 35 years of business." I was still smiling. "How did he take that?" "About as well as you'd expect. He hung up on me." She sighed. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" "Honestly, I think I'm better than I've been in years." "Is that weird?" "Not even a little bit. I watched you try to earn his approval your entire childhood. I watched him dismiss every achievement and excuse every one of Lauren's failures. Your mother and I talked about it constantly. How concerned she was about both of you. You for never being enough, and Lauren for never having to be." The validation hit me more than I had anticipated. Mom never told me anything about it. She didn't want you to feel forced to choose between admitting the problem and maintaining your relationship with your father. She hoped he would figure it out on his own. Carol's voice softened. "She'd be proud of you for walking away. She always said you were stronger than you knew." We talked for another 20 minutes, Carol filling in details regarding talks she had with Mom that I had no idea about. My mother had apparently been documenting the favoritism for years, keeping a journal of how Dad treated Lauren and me differently. She meant to confront him about it later, but the stroke came first. "Do you still have Mom's journals?" I asked you. "I do. She asked me to keep them safe. She told me. Someday you might need to know you weren't imagining things." Carol paused. "Do you want them?" "Yeah, I think I do." After we hung up, I sat in my empty office, reflecting on all the years Mom had quietly watched the imbalance, seen my pain, and recognized the harm being done. To compensate by becoming my champion, applauding my she-attempted achievements when Dad refused, and listening to my complaints when I couldn't express them anywhere else. Losing her had removed the only barrier between me and the full extent of Dad's favoritism. The past 6 years without her had been increasingly difficult. Each episode became more distressing as there was no one left to validate my reality. The framed photo of my colleagues from last year's holiday party went into a box. The absurd, "World's Okay Boss" mug I'd received as a prank gift was wrapped in tissue paper. Beneath a stack of technical documents, I discovered a card handed to me by the team 2 years ago, when we met an impossible deadline. Inside they'd all left personal messages thanking me for protecting them from unreasonable expectations and pushing for the resources they required. "You never throw us under the bus," Ryan wrote. "Even when it would be easier," Daniel had added. "Best boss I've ever had. You actually listen." Reading through those letters now that the office had been stripped and my work here was coming to an end, I realized I'd created something more precious than Dad probably imagined. Loyalty is earned via respect, rather than demanded by hierarchy. A team that trusted me because I continually put their needs before my own. Professional relationships are built on skill and mutual support, rather than favoritism and politics. Lauren had the title, the corner office she'd been hoping for, and Dad's unshakable backing. What she had never been able to establish was credibility with the folks who did the actual work. By late afternoon, my office was barren. 5 years of my work experience fit into 4 cardboard boxes and a rolling cart. I expected to be sad or angry, but instead a weird peace had crept over me. Being undervalued your entire life means you ultimately stop trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. I had waited 28 years for Dad to recognize my efforts, admit that I had inherited his work ethic and business intelligence, and perhaps even express his pride in me. Clearly, none of that was occurring. I took out my laptop and launched a new document. I had been composing versions of the resignation letter in my head for months, but it only took me 20 minutes to write. I kept it professional and brief, thanked the organization for the chance and gave 10 days notice for my contract, which became effective immediately. Then I opened my email and composed a new message. Every board member, all department heads, and a number of major clients were among the recipients. The subject line said, Development Department Documentation and Project Status. I was always cautious about paperwork. Every project included thorough files defining timetables, resource allocations, budget considerations, and technical specs. Every team meeting included notes. Every choice was supported by documentation that explained why it was made. I'd also documented every time Lauren made commitments without consulting development, every ridiculous timeline she requested, and every budget she squandered on frivolous things while insisting my team accomplish more with less. Professional paperwork, no personal information, just facts, dates, and email chains. The email took 2 hours to compile. I've attached spreadsheets comparing the revenue generated by development to other departments. Project timelines, comparing the predicted completion dates I supplied to the dates Lauren promised clients. Budget analysis show how resources were distributed among divisions. And I supplied the email chain from the incident that precipitated my suspension, as well as 5 additional similar situations from the previous year in which Lauren made commitments without contacting the teams responsible for carrying them out. One particularly damaging file depicted a project from 8 months ago in which Lauren promised a client a deliverable in 6 weeks. The development team had predicted 16 weeks. Dad had sided with Lauren, saying that we could make her deadline. We completed in 14 weeks, but only because my team worked 60-hour weeks and I personally funded the overtime expenditures that over budget, taking a salary cut to make the numbers work. The client had been satisfied. Lauren had taken credit for the successful delivery, but no one except my staff realized how much it had cost to make it happen. My finger was hovering above the send button. This would burn bridges, sever my connection with my father, and rule out any hope of reconciliation with Lauren. Everything I established here would be reduced to a cautionary story about family enterprises and ineffective management. I pressed send. The second email was sent to a recruitment business with whom I had previously communicated 3 months earlier, when I first considered quitting. They'd approached me about a post directing the technology division at a competitor, but I gently declined due to family loyalty. It's funny how quickly loyalty disappears when it just goes in one direction. Hello, Rachel. I am ready to talk about the potential we discussed in August. If the post is still open, I may begin immediately. The third email was addressed to a lawyer I spoke with last year about contract specifics. Paul, I need to go over the non-compete clause in my job agreement. Can we meet tomorrow morning? I knew what the clause said because I wrote it myself during the company's legal restructuring 4 years ago. It banned me from working for direct competitors for 16 months, but the definition of a direct competitor was limited enough to leave me with many possibilities. The contract also featured elements I insisted on that other employees lacked, such as complete vesting of my stock options regardless of job tenure and a severance payment that kicked in under certain conditions. Being suspended without cause qualifies. By 6 o'clock, my office was empty and my car was full. I took one final look at the space that had been mine. Then I went away without looking back. The house I bought 3 years ago was in a peaceful community about 20 minutes from the office. Small by executive standards, but mine, paid for with money I earned rather than inherited. The payment was affordable, the garden was tranquil, and the neighbors were pleasant without being bothersome. I carried the boxes inside, drank a large glass of wine, and sat on the couch with my laptop. The responses to my documentation email have begun to arrive. The first came from Michael Brooks, the company's lead attorney. Call me immediately, said board member Thomas Reed. We need to discuss this information. Can you come in tomorrow? 3 clients copied my email to their account managers, asking about project timelines. 2 of them expressly expressed worries about commitments Lauren had made. Daniel from development. Holy, is this real? Everyone's freaking out. I didn't answer to any of them. Instead, I opened a bottle of better wine and ordered some Thai food, feeling lighter than I have in years. The phone rang 47 times that evening. Dad called 12 times. Lauren dialed number 8. Michael Brooks called every 30 minutes, like clockwork. I let them all go to voicemail. The texts became increasingly frenzied. Dad's first voicemail was irate, asking that I call him back soon and accusing me of being unprofessional. His second question was perplexing, asking what I felt I was accomplishing. The third was almost imploring, stating that we needed to discuss this sensibly. Lauren's messages resulted in threats. She accused me of attempting to damage the company, being envious and betraying the family. Her final voicemail was filled with sobs, stating that I was ruining all Dad had created. The irony was almost humorous. I'd spent 6 years helping Dad build something, but Lauren had spent the same time relying on his reputation and making mistakes for others to clean up. Michael Brooks' words were more measured but more urgent. The legal consequences of the documents I'd supplied appeared to have become clear, and he wanted to talk about my objectives. That night, I got the best sleep I'd had in months. The morning came with prolonged silence from me and continued chaos from everyone else. The calls had expanded into text messages, emails, and even a visit from my father's secretary, who asked me to contact the office. I replied with one group text to Dad, Lauren, and Michael. Rachel from the recruitment business called at 7:30. "I'll be in at 9 to collect my final belongings and submit formal paperwork. No discussion is required. The position is still open, and after seeing your portfolio, they want to fast-track the interview process. Can you meet with the CEO this afternoon?" "Absolutely." Paul, my lawyer, made the second call. "Your non-compete is narrower than I remembered. You have options. Come by at 11 and we'll discuss strategy." "No problem." I dressed carefully for the office, wearing a navy suit that exuded confidence without violence. Professional, composed, and eager to close this chapter neatly. The parking lot was fuller than normal at 8:30 a.m. Apparently, word had spread, and people wanted to see what happened next. I strolled through the foyer, head held high, carrying a leather portfolio with my resignation letter and numerous other documents Paul had produced after I texted him about the situation last night. The executive floor was chaotic. Assistants crowded in corners, murmuring. Department heads stood at doorways, appearing anxious. Everyone seemed to be expecting an explosion. My former office. Door was open, and I could see Lauren seated at my desk, going through the drawers I'd already emptied. When I approached, she looked up, her expression changing from frustration to rage. "You had no right to send that email," she added, getting up so rapidly that my former chair tumbled backward. "You've made me look incompetent in front of everyone." "The documentation speaks for itself," I said quietly, without entering the office. "I merely gave information on project schedules and resource allocation." "If that makes you appear incompetent, maybe the problem isn't with my email." Her face flushed scarlet. "Dad's going to fire you for this. You've destroyed any chance of coming back." "I'm not coming back," I said, holding up my portfolio. "I'm here to make it official." Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Dad appeared, with Michael Brooks close behind him. My father appeared to have aged 5 years overnight, with his face drawn and his suit rumpled in ways I had never seen before. "My office now," he said. He turned without waiting for a reply. "Actually, the conference room would be more appropriate," Michael Brooks explained gently. "This has moved beyond family matters." The identical conference room where I was suspended yesterday suddenly had a completely different vibe. The board members were not present, but Michael had brought along a paralegal who set up a laptop to record the events. "Before we begin," Michael cautiously stated, "I need to clarify that this meeting is being documented for company policy regarding employment matters." Dad appeared to want to fight, but Michael's gaze stopped him. "My father might run the company, but smart executives listen to their lawyers during potential legal situations," I replied, sliding the letter across the table to my father. "I'm resigning effective immediately. Per Section 7 of my employment contract, suspension without documented cause triggers the severance provision. I'm also exercising my stock options per Section 12, which allows immediate vesting upon voluntary departure following disciplinary action deemed inappropriate by outside counsel." He had clearly read my contract and was aware of the specific sections I was addressing. "You wrote those provisions yourself during the restructuring," Dad explained slowly, a realization dawning on his face. "I did. At the time you called me paranoid for including them. Turns out I was just prepared." Lauren had followed us to the conference room and is now standing in the doorway. "This is blackmail. You're trying to extort the company." "Exercising contractual rights is extortion?" Michael inquired gently. "These are provisions she negotiated in good faith 4 years ago, and the company agreed to them." "How much?" Dad's voice had become flat, the tone he used to calculate company losses. "The severance package is 5 months' salary. The stock options are currently valued at approximately $400,000 based on yesterday's evaluation." I kept my voice level and professional. "I'll also need my complete personnel file, documentation of all projects I led, and references from the 3 board members who served on the development of her site committee. And if we refuse..." Lauren's fists were tightly clasped. Then I refer you to Section 19, which outlines the dispute resolution process. It involves arbitration, which would be expensive, time-consuming, and public. I saw my dad's gaze. I'd prefer to handle this cleanly. I've already secured another position. I'm not interested in dragging this out or causing additional damage to the company. Additional damage? Dad asked, his voice rising. You sent confidential information to clients and board members. You've undermined your sister's credibility. You violated about a dozen policies regarding information disclosure. Actually, Michael abruptly responded. The information she shared was project internal communications. Nothing confidential, nothing documentation and proprietary, nothing that violates her contract or company policy. I've reviewed everything she sent. It's all factual reporting of project statuses and business decisions. The paralegal was silently typing, recording every word of the talk. Why? Dad eventually asked, and for the first time, his tone was fatigued rather than furious. Why would you blow up everything like this? You suspended me for doing my job. You sided with Lauren when she made promises she couldn't keep, and you blamed me for being honest about realistic timelines. I kept my voice calm, refusing to allow emotion enter. Yesterday wasn't the first time, Dad. It was just the final time. So you sabotaged the company. I documented reality. If reality is damaging, maybe the problem isn't with my documentation. Lauren sounded disgusted. You're just mad because Dad gave me a leadership position. You've always been jealous that I'm older, that I got to work with him first, that he trusts me more. I couldn't hold back my laughter. Trust. He trusts you to make promises you can't keep. He trusts you to take credit for other people's work. He trusts you to prioritize your ego over the company's success. That's enough, Dad exclaimed forcefully. You're right, it's enough. I stood, gathered my portfolio. Michael, I'll expect the paperwork for the severance and stock options by the end of business today. You have my lawyer's contact information. Wait. Dad's hand rose, a gesture that had always indicated stop. Listen, obey. We can work this out. Take a few weeks to cool down and we'll discuss how to move forward. There is no moving forward, not here. I approached the entrance and hesitated. You built something incredible, Dad. Sterling Tech was everything you dreamed it could be. You should probably figure out how to keep it that way instead of letting it crumble because you can't admit your favorite child isn't qualified for the role you gave her. Lauren's cheeks turned pale. How dare you? The Hamilton project launches in 5 weeks, I remarked, turning back to face them. It's the biggest contract the company's ever landed. Development has been working on it for 8 months. Daniel Kim is leading the team, and he's brilliant. But he needs support from management who understands technical realities. I glanced straight at my father. Lauren told the client that they may have additional features beyond the scope of the initial project. These enhancements would necessitate another 5 months of development and double the present budget. The client believes they would receive them in 6 weeks because that is what she told them. Michael Brooks' face became much pallid than Lauren's. The data is all on the shared drive, including Hamilton project scope specifications, timeline analyses, resource requirements, and an email exchange in which Lauren made promises without consulting development. I altered my portfolio. You can fire Daniel for telling you the same truth I did, or you can fix the situation before it turns into a lawsuit. It's your choice. I walked out while they were still processing that. The elevator journey down seemed strange. I'd been working in this building for 6 years. Traversed these hallways hundreds of times, created relationships and projects, and had a career I was proud of. Everything ended because I revealed the truth and refused to apologize. My desk had already been emptied, but I paused at development on my way out. The team was gathered around Daniel's office, evidently having witnessed enough drama to put together what was going on. You're really leaving? Emily, one of my senior developers, seemed stunned. I am, but you're in very good hands. I caught Daniel's glance. Trust yourself. You know what you're doing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The Hamilton project, he began, is thoroughly documented. Stand firm on the timeline, and don't let them push you into making promises you can't keep. I addressed the entire crew. You're the best developers I've ever worked with. You built something incredible here. Don't let anyone diminish or take credit for your efforts. There were tears, hugs, and promises to remain in touch. I meant every assurance I gave them, but I also realized that going out that door meant cutting most of these ties. People would feel torn between allegiance to me and loyalty to the organization. Most people would prefer the firm because that's where their paychecks came from. The lobby seemed like a challenge. Employees I'd worked with for years watched me go, some with sorrow, others with curiosity, and a few with hardly veiled pleasure at witnessing executive drama. I got to my car before the shaking began. Adrenaline had gotten me through the confrontation, but now the reality of what I had done hit me. I resigned my work, severed ties with my family, ruined my connection with my father, and promised never to talk to my sister again. Rachel from the recruitment business texted me, and my smartphone chimed. "The CEO wants to meet with you at 2. Send me your portfolio." I sent her the paperwork file I supplied yesterday, sans the internal email chains, project summaries, development achievements, revenue growth, and team leadership examples. My career was reduced to a PDF that strangers could analyze to determine whether I was worth their time. Paul, the lawyer, called as I was driving out of the parking lot. "Michael Brooks just contacted me. They want to negotiate." "Nothing to negotiate. The contract is clear. They're worried about the Hamilton project. Apparently your assessment about the scope creep was accurate, and they're facing a potential lawsuit if they can't deliver what was promised. Not my problem anymore. They want you to consult through the project completion. Premium rate, flexible schedule, no direct reporting to family members." I was about to giggle. "So they want me to fix Lauren's mess while she takes credit for it. They want you to prevent a 7-figure lawsuit. The offer is compelling." "The answer is no." Paul was silent for a moment. "You're sure? This could be a bridge back if you change your mind later." "I don't want a bridge back, I want out." "Then I'll handle the severance negotiation. They'll probably try to reduce the stock option valuation, but we have documentation showing the accurate assessment." The day went by quickly. Meet with Rachel and her customer. Discussing the new role. Negotiating a salary and benefits package that exceeded my previous earnings at Sterling Tech. Tour their facilities. Introduction to the team that I would be directing. Conversation about the vision and growth strategy. By 5 o'clock, I had received an official offer letter with a 2-week start date. The severance paperwork had arrived at Paul's office by 6 o'clock. Michael had added a confidentiality agreement that prohibited me from mentioning the reasons for my leaving. Paul returned a new version that would prevent the company from denigrating me to potential employers or clients. They reached an agreement by 8 o'clock. The stock options were transferred before the end of business the next day. $400,000 was placed into my account. 6 years of accumulating equity was suddenly liquidated. With the severance package, I had enough financial buffer to take my time adjusting to the new role without stress. Dad called once more that week. I let it go to voicemail. His message was brief. "I don't understand why you're throwing everything away. Call me when you're ready to be reasonable." I removed it without replying. The Hamilton project collapsed just as I predicted. 3 weeks after I left, the client learned that the things Lauren had promised were not attainable within the initial timetable. They threatened legal action. Sterling Tech had to negotiate a settlement that included a partial refund and a 6-month extension of the deadline. Daniel called me amid the crisis and asked for advice. I talked him through the technical solutions, assisted him in preparing a presentation for the client, and guided him through unpleasant meetings with management. He handled it well, but the harm to Sterling Tech's reputation had already occurred. 2 board members have resigned. 3 clients transferred their business to competitors. The company's valuation decreased by 18%. Lauren was relegated from customer relations to special projects, a meaningless term that kept her on the payroll without granting her ability to make promises. Dad engaged an outside consultant to help revamp the management team. The consultant's report appears to include critical appraisals of nepotistic hiring practices and insufficient accountability mechanisms. I learned about this through professional networks and former colleagues who reached out despite the obvious awkwardness. The shot and Freya should have been rewarding, but instead I felt sad. Sterling Tech had been something exceptional, and seeing it falter felt like losing a love that should have succeeded, but never did. My new position exceeded my expectations. The team was talented. The corporate leadership really listened to technical assessments, and nobody expected me to clean up the damage left by incompetent family members. 6 months in, we had launched 2 key products and signed contracts with 4 Fortune 500 businesses. I purchased a larger home, adopted a puppy, and began dating someone who worked in a completely different profession and had no link to technology or family turmoil. Life progressed in ways that seemed healthy and sustainable. Dad paid an unexpected visit to my house a year after I graduated from Sterling Tech. He seemed older, smaller, and degraded in ways unrelated to physical size. "Can I come in?" he inquired. When I opened the door, I contemplated saying no, but curiosity won. "Sure." We sat in my living room, awkward stillness between us. My dog, Cooper, a rescue mongrel, looked at Dad suspiciously before lying at my feet. "The company's struggling," Dad finally remarked. "We lost 2 more major clients last month. Revenue is down 30% from when you left." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" He stared squarely at me for the first time. "You destroyed everything I built." "No, Dad. I documented what was already happening. You destroyed it by refusing to see reality." "Lauren made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. She made mistakes repeatedly, and you enabled her every time. You chose protecting her ego over protecting your company." He was silent for a long time. "She's my daughter. So am I." The words hung in the air between us, conveying weight that neither of us had recognized previously. "I know." His voice cracked slightly. "Your mother used to tell me I was too hard on you, too easy on Lauren. I thought she was imagining things, seeing favoritism that wasn't there. It was there. I know that now." He wiped his face tiredly. "The consultant's report was illuminating. Apparently I've been displaying systematic bias favoring the elder daughter while holding the younger to unrealistic standards." Her exact words sound accurate. "I came here to ask if you'd consider coming back, not to your old position. As COO, full authority over operations, seat on the board, equity stake that would make you a major shareholder." The offer hovered between us, intriguing in ways I hadn't anticipated. My father's company, the legacy he left behind, the chance to right the wrongs. "No." Dad's face fell. "Just like that. You won't even consider it." "I don't need to consider it. I have a position I love. Working with people who respect my expertise, building something new. Why would I go back to constantly proving my worth to people who've already decided I don't have any? Because it's family. Family should be the place where you don't have to prove anything, Dad. Family should be the people who see your value even when you mess up. You gave that unconditional acceptance to Lauren, but you never gave it to me." He remained quiet, staring at his hands. "I failed you." "Yes, you did." "Is there any way to fix that?" I gave it some serious thought, hoping to find a genuine solution. "I don't know. Maybe eventually, but not by offering me a job to save your company. If you want a relationship with me, it can't be transactional." "What would it look like if it wasn't transactional?" "It would look like you acknowledging what happened without trying to justify it. It would look like you respecting my decisions even when they disappoint you. It would look like building something new instead of trying to resurrect something that's already dead." Dad nodded slowly. "That sounds hard." "Most worthwhile things are." He stood to leave, stopping at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished in your new position. I've heard good things about the work you're doing." "Thank you." The words felt insufficient yet real. "Can I call you sometime? Not about business. Just to talk." "Maybe, we'll see." He walked away and I closed the door behind him, leaning against it while Cooper leaned into my knees for silent comfort. The conversation should have ended, but it felt more like a beginning. Not necessarily reconciliation, but the prospect of something new based on honesty rather than obligation. Lauren never reached out. I learned through various routes that she had left Sterling Tech and went to California. Supposedly she worked in real estate, where her capacity to make optimistic promises could be beneficial. Sterling Tech continued to struggle, but eventually stabilized as a smaller, more focused corporation. Dad hired expert management and delegated responsibility for day-to-day operations. The corporation would never achieve the heights it once did, but it would survive. My career grew in ways I had never believed possible. 3 years after leaving Sterling Tech, I was hired to oversee innovation strategy for a major technology company with a global presence. 5 years later, I started my own consulting firm, focusing on assisting family businesses with succession planning and management changes. The irony was not lost on me that I became an expert in the very factors that had wrecked my connection with my own family business. Dad and I communicated periodically, painstakingly constructing something resembling a connection. We had dinner every few months, and our chats were safe from work, focusing on books, current affairs, and his reluctant attempts at retirement pastimes. He never apologized verbally, but his actions demonstrated progress. He came to my wedding 3 years after our living room talk, escorting me down the aisle and giving a toast that acknowledged his mistakes as a father without making the day about him. He sent birthday cards with handwritten comments rather than generic signatures. He inquired about my life with real curiosity, rather than seeking opportunities to provide counsel. It wasn't the relationship I desired as a youngster, but it was genuine and based on acceptance, rather than expectations. Looking back, my suspension was the finest thing that could have happened to me. It prompted a confrontation that I had been dreading for years. It pushed me out of a devalued situation and onto prospects for growth. The expense was substantial. Family relationships have shattered. A job that I had invested in but had abandoned was undoubtedly sacrificed for risk. But on the other side of that upheaval was independence, achievement, and the tremendous satisfaction that comes from not having to apologize for taking up space. Sometimes the most spectacular retaliation is just refusing to play the game anymore. Walking away does not mean giving up. It's acknowledging that your involvement in someone else's tale isn't necessary for you to have your own captivating story. My father wanted me to apologize in order to maintain peace and appearances. Instead, I chose honesty and accountability, even if it meant losing everything I had achieved with his company. The vacant desk and resignation letter symbolized more than just quitting a job. They symbolized choosing myself, respecting my expertise, and demanding respect rather than begging for scraps of praise. The lawyer's pallid expression and Dad's dying smile were not about company drama or familial treachery. They were about people finally seeing reality after years of denying to do so. I did not ruin Sterling Tech. I just ceased shielding it from the effects of its own malfunction. The company's difficulties after my departure were neither my obligation to avert nor my failure to accept. They were the natural result of poor management, cronyism, and a failure to put expertise over comfort. My sister smirked that morning because she believed she had won. She'd suspended me, showed her power over Dad, and put me in my place despite years of competence and accomplishments she couldn't equal. Victory, however, is not determined by who is suspended or favored. It's about who lives a life they're proud of, who surrounds themselves with others who recognize their worth, and who achieves success without undermining others. I got it now. A career I enjoy. Relationships built on mutual respect. A life in which my accomplishments speak for themselves rather than being continually compared to someone else's comfort. That is the real conclusion to this narrative. Not the dramatic departure, the company's troubles, or even the shaky reconciliation with my father. The ending shows me 5 years later, sitting in my own office with my own team, doing something significant without continually looking over my shoulder for approval that would never come. Sometimes you do not receive the apologies you deserve. People who should appreciate your worth may never do so. Sometimes family represents sorrow rather than support. But you always get to decide what happens next. You can continue to struggle for recognition from people who refuse to give it to you, or you can channel that energy into creating something new with people who already see your potential. I selected the latter and have never regretted it.